The game. I guess I don't really need to say much else. And if you're not getting it so far, then you're probably arrived at the wrong podcast. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. This is Ohio State Buckeyes Live. And of course, we join you each and every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And for many of you, the other 51 weeks are just a prelude to this. This is what it comes down to. Ohio State and Michigan, of course. We've got a Michigan guest standing by, but of course, on either flank, we got Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports, Bucknuts, of course, Tony Gerdeman. It's BuckeyeHuddle.com, and it's the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Lock in this week and for the remainder of the season and for the rest of your life while you're at it with Tony talking Buckeyes football. And, of course, Michigan Mondays is always a highlight, but especially this week. Guys, how we doing?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Why don't we just bring in our Michigan guest and go right to it, and I'll set him up, and then you guys can just break down the X's and O's, and I'll chime in from time to time. But we've got Alejandro Zuniga joining us from 247 Sports, Michigan Insider. Alejandro, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing? Happy Thanksgiving.
How you doing, Alejandro?
Happy Thanksgiving to you. We're so glad you could join us to give the Michigan perspective, and I'll go big picture. Rear ends in the seats, TV ratings, when you throw it all together, NFL players, it's tough to top this one. Is this objectively the greatest rivalry in sports?
I haven't been to anyone that's better. Certainly in college football, I think there's very little argument there. You could say that in terms of people who watch this game, care about this game, the money that surrounds this game, whether that's to players, obviously, but TV ratings, everything. I mean, you can't ask for much more. And obviously, I think the most important is what people feel about this and the way people think about this game 364 days out of the year to get to that 365th day. It's been a special rivalry since the very beginning. And it's one of those games that matters every single year, no matter what. And the stakes are always big, and they are again this year. I am pumped for this game. I don't like the week leading up to the game, especially now that it falls on Thanksgiving, but I love the game itself, and I love the fact that this rivalry, A, exists, and B, that it's two programs that are so successful pretty much year in and year out, and have a lot of dislike for each other, but also a lot of respect for each other at the same time.
So before Steve and Tony jump in, let me just follow up on that, because obviously we're in a 12-team playoff, and we did see a unique situation in 2022 that we thought we would never see, that Ohio State still got into the playoff with a loss, and now we're in a 12-team playoff. So I don't try to tell people how to feel. They can put whatever emotional importance on whatever game. Absolutely. I'm not the one to say how you should feel about a game, but tangibly it's less important. So do you think that that's impacted anything?
I probably, again, I'm in the same boat. I don't want to tell people how to feel. I personally hope that Michigan and Ohio State never play twice in a year. Personally, I hope what makes the rivalry special in part is that it's a one-time thing. You win or you lose, and you got to deal with that for the rest of the year, right? That's part of what makes the joy so special. If you win, it's part of what makes the pain so brutal if you lose. It would be a bummer to me if this were you play on Thanksgiving week and then you come back and you play again for a Big Ten championship game the next week, or if you're playing a couple weeks down the line in the college football playoff. Obviously, TV ratings would be through the roof, but I love the fact that this game means everything, and it means everything because it only happens once. And it's unfortunate to me that it's diluted a little bit in the current era of college football.
Yeah, I think it deals with like where you come from, like what stage of life are you at? I think if you're in your mid 40s and older, you grew up that you had to win this game. You absolutely had to win this game, and nothing else really mattered. And honestly, you had to win this game most years to advance to the Rose Bowl or to the BCS championship or to the playoff, as it all evolved over time. So that's been the importance. But I think that if you're under the age of 45 or 40, whatever, and you have the opportunity to win a national championship, that probably your value system is set on, hey, let's just go win the national championship, and whatever happens along the way happens along the way. So I think, again, it may depend on what stage of life you're in and what you value, I guess. But, I think that for all dyed-in-the-wool fans of both schools, this is the game. And whatever diminishment has come from this, I think the raw emotion of some of the things that have transpired the last 4 years has been enough to still stoke the fire a good bit. I mean, I won't get into the off the field stuff, but certainly Michigan trying to plant the flag last year, I'm sure they've got that playing on a loop inside the Woody Hayes Center right now. The ugly brawl that took place at the end of the game, there was some raw emotion going on there.
Yeah, it's funny. Has the game diminished at all? Well, it didn't look like it did. It didn't look like there was any diminishment last year or the year before that. Yeah, so I do like the argument that playing the game more than once diminishes it more than even it is now. I think that's interesting. I think it's correct as well, because you shouldn't be able to suffer the pain of the loss and then be able to wipe it away 1 week later in a Big Ten championship game. It's like that's the trump card, or in the playoff. For all great rivalries, you should be able to suffer with it. Like Alabama winning a national championship after beating the LSU team that beat them and just wiping away that loss. It's kind of that takes away from it more than the kind of the playoff situation that we're in now. So I'm with you on that one. But yeah, I've grown up with this rivalry. I love it. Steve, you're talking about the need to win it. When I was in college, 95, 96, 97, all seasons ruined by Michigan. And if that happened this year or like now, it's like, well, it's another loss. Yeah, it
not
hurt.
really
It
ruined.
sucks. Yeah, and you can keep on going. And I think for generations, there are both sides.
Have a meeting on Monday and go win the national championship.
Well, and that's the other thing I think with this one. The meeting last year, the team meeting after that game, like how many times can you do that? How many times can you bounce back from this from a loss like this?
Not with the same players.
And just go ahead and it's like, all right, there's a loss. Now let's all bind together and go win a national championship. It's like, I don't know that you can do that every year.
Yeah, I think if you're talking to Michigan fans and talking about what made the last, let's say the 3 years that resulted in the national championship for Michigan, but then, those 3 years, what made that so special was the knowledge that heading into the Michigan-Ohio State game, there was no guarantee of a playoff berth if they lost that game. So in 21, Michigan came in with a loss already. In 22, that was down in Columbus, but it was a 14 playoff format with 2 undefeated teams. If I recall correctly, you just didn't know if you were going to make the playoff in a 14 format. And then 23, given the off the field stuff, there was just a lot riding on that. And again, 14 playoff, very limited entry into that national championship field. So I think that kept it, that kept the stakes as high as you could ask for. And last year, I think it was funny that both sides of the rivalry could kind of hold something over each other's heads of like, hey, Michigan, yeah, they went into Columbus and won. But then Ohio State, we won the national championship. So, but both sides had something to kind of hold over each other for 365 days. And I don't love that, again, because I kind of like the rivalry being the end all be all. But I also understand that college football is changing. It's moved from a regional sport to a more national sport, for better or for worse. And you appreciate the parts of college football that make it so special while you still have them. And this game being the last game of the regular season and almost always having these extremely high stakes is special.
I would be okay with a second matchup in a year if it's for the national title. Like say the end all be all, then it's like, okay, that trumps all. And also I think there's just as much opportunity to beat a team for the second time in a year. That's never been done. And then that's also some kind of bragging rights that good luck topping that one. You beat Ohio State or Michigan for 2 times in a year and also walk away with the national title. That's you almost have to be allowed to plant a flag at that point.
I would love to see that spectacle and have that feeling one time of a rematch in a season, one time. But if it happened like 3 times in 8 years, it'd be like, okay, this is the NFL. This is Ravens Steelers playing in the playoffs after they play twice in the yeah, just one time it would be interesting.
I think one time might be all we get. The world might end if that happened. But
I mean, the Big Ten tried to make it happen with legends and leaders, and it just never did. And so these things, they have to be organic. You can't force them.
Yeah, fair.
Well, Alejandro, we'll go to the field, and we'll go to maybe the most important player on the field, and that's Bryce Underwood, at least on the Michigan side. It's been my take, and I've seen Michigan play almost every week, that there was a point in the season, maybe after the Oklahoma game, that he was as consistent as you could hope a true freshman to be, let's say that, but then he would show 3 or 4 special throws or plays a game to let you know, okay, that's what he could be on a regular basis here pretty soon. Maybe a bit of a regression against Wisconsin, Michigan State, Purdue. And then that Northwestern drive, the throw that he made along the sideline, some of the other throws, I know he made mistakes in that game, and they put up almost 500 yards of offense and only scored 24 points and needed a walk-off field goal. But maybe he puts that in his back pocket, and he now has that as an experience that Julian Sand does not have of leading his team down the field when it mattered to win the game.
I think that's all fair. I think if you look at Bryce Underwood's season as a whole, listen, you've got to think about the fact that he was 17 coming into Ann Arbor. When he enrolled, he was a 17-year-old. He didn't turn 18 until a week or 2 before the season started. And Michigan tried very hard to make sure that he wasn't going to be the de facto starting quarterback just based on his recruiting pedigree. They tried to bring in a couple transfer portal guys, including Mikey Keene from Fresno State. Unfortunately for him and for the program, I'd say Mikey Keene ended up being hurt with an injury that limited him both in the spring, throughout the summer, and all throughout fall camp. It took him a long time to get healthy. So that essentially meant that Bryce Underwood was thrust into a starting role without a whole lot of competition, and maybe earlier than Michigan would have wanted him to be handed the reins to this offense. So given that context, I think the season has been a productive one and a positive one for Bryce Underwood. You can see the steps he's taken. Progress has happened. It's not always been linear. I think it's fair to say that the Purdue game, the Michigan State game were not his strongest games. But you see, like you mentioned, a few throws or a few moments every game where it's like, oh, like that's some arm talent. That's something special that certainly Michigan didn't have last year. And certainly that you could project down the line and say, this is what makes him a 5-star. And then these last couple of weeks in particular, I mean, you mentioned there was a 5-turnover game against Northwestern. That wasn't all on Bryce Underwood, but they moved the ball pretty efficiently, outside of those turnovers against Northwestern. And then certainly the Maryland game, one of his cleaner performances, one of his more, complete 3.5 quarter performances, because he got to sit the end of the game. You feel like he's hitting his stride a little bit more at the right time. Certainly not where he's going to be as a quarterback, but also you can see the steps he's taken from week 1 to now to say he's probably playing his best football at the time you want him to be playing his best football. Now, what's that going to look like against a very good defense and an NFL coordinator in Matt Patricia? Who knows? But it's what you got, and that's what you got to run with, right?
What in particular, if I can ask, Oklahoma, obviously, with Venables, is known for being a great defensive coach, sure, and maybe USC as well. What were the things that maybe that they were able to do, I guess, against Underwood that kind of limited what he could do, I suppose, in those games?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say, I'd look at the offensive line for Michigan. Michigan's offensive line, starting 3 redshirt freshmen. That wasn't necessarily the case in the Oklahoma game, but pressure, it's a much better run blocking offensive line than pass blocking offensive line. So what I'd start with is obviously they were able to get pressure on the quarterback. Bryce Underwood, like many quarterbacks, but particularly as a true freshman, like his numbers, you see them you see them drop pretty precipitously when he's under pressure. At least you did earlier in the season. So that's number one. And Venables, obviously, his defense, like they do such a good job of kind of knowing what's coming, and B, disguising looks pre-snap, and that being a first road environment for Bryce Underwood. Night games, Bryce Underwood, for some reason, he struggled a lot more in games that kick off at night versus during the day. It's just been a theme this year, and Michigan's had a lot of night games. So there's that as well. And then what I'd say too is they've developed his arsenal a bit more as the season's gone on. Like they didn't do a whole lot in the RPO game earlier in the year. That's something that Michigan hasn't traditionally done a lot with. It's a bit of an expensive install, if you will. They've leaned into that a lot more these last couple weeks against Northwestern, particularly to very good extent. They've run the ball. They've used Bryce Underwood as a running threat more than they did earlier in the year. Sharon Moore and Michigan as a whole have been pretty averse to using their quarterback in the run game. JJ McCarthy was frequently hurt because of hits he took in the quarterback run game. So they were averse to that earlier in the year. They've leaned into it a bit more later in the year, realizing you've got a 6'5", 240-pound linebacker turned quarterback who can take those kind of hits and can make those type of plays. And then they've also, with the development of the run game, the play action game has gotten better as well. So Michigan's run for 200 plus yards, I believe, in 4 straight games. That lets you have, a strong play action game, and that makes things easier for a young quarterback. So I think all of those things combined, Bryce Underwood looks uncomfortable when you are asking him to sit in the pocket with an offensive line that isn't fantastic in pass blocking and asking him to read a full field. So Michigan's done better at, using the RPO game, which gives them easier and quicker reads. He's very good when you get him rolling out and throwing kind of across his body almost. He's very good with that. But if you're having him kind of take a snap, not run play action, and have him read an entire defense, that's sometimes when you see those freshman characteristics leak out a bit more.
Yeah, he had negative yards rushing in both of those games because of sacks, and wasn't necessarily as fully weaponized in the running game as he is now and scrambling. The other key with those two losses, they were 5 of 23 combined on third downs. I think that's one of the huge differences. And the last 3 weeks, they're 27 of 39, to give you an idea of how they're 12 of 14 against Maryland, which I don't know if I've ever seen before. It's just very, very effective. And with Bryce, I think the interesting thing is against Northwestern, plays very well, then has the 2 interceptions and the fumbled mesh in the fourth quarter, and then still bounces back from that and leads them on a drive where they are down in the fourth quarter for a touchdown. Say whatever you want about Bryce Underwood or for Ohio State fans, he's led his team on a drive to win a game, and that's something that Julian Sayin hasn't had to experience yet. So that's a positive check in Bryce Underwood's box there, that he's had to do that, and it wouldn't be the first time he's doing it if he has to do it this week. So I think my other question with him is just the random inaccuracy of the overthrows that Maryland didn't take advantage of, some other teams haven't taken advantage of, where just sometimes it seems like the composure of the technique gets a little wonky, and the pressure has a lot to do with that. I've also he's been better since Andrew Marsh has stepped in. How have you seen with Donovan McCauley? Because it seemed like those two guys are trying their hardest to get on the same page, Bryce Underwood and Donovan McCauley, and it was just be like 8 targets, 3 catches, and it just wasn't working for those guys. I think Andrew Marsh, his elevation these last 5, 6, 7 games has made everybody in this passing game better.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, 100%. A couple things, like I'd agree with that Bryce Underwood, particularly earlier in the season, like his footwork under pressure, not fantastic. You could see some of those mechanics breaking down. Another thing that I think Michigan's receivers had to adjust to, but also he had to adjust as well. He very much entered with a Joe Milton-esque fastball, if you will, that, he's going to throw the ball 70 miles an hour, whether the receiver is 20 yards downfield or whether, it's a check down to the running back 3 yards away. So I think finding that touch was part of his development this year. And then receivers getting used to the fact that he's got a cannon for an arm, that was part of it as well. Michigan's receivers struggled with drops through the first half of the year. There's no doubt about that. I think the McCulley question is an ongoing one. I think he's been a fine transfer portal pickup and has performed well for Michigan this year. But Michigan, Bryce Underwood and he haven't connected on the deep ball quite as often as they certainly would like to. I think it's a little bit in both people's camps. I think Bryce has to do a better job of putting a little more air under the ball and giving a 6'5" receiver who's a jump ball, a jump ball guy, a chance to make a play. Because there have been too many times where, it's a go route down the sideline and the ball's sailing 10 yards out of bounds, or it's a line drive where, there's just no time to make that adjustment to the ball and make a play on it. At the same time, there have been opportunities for McCulley. He made a few very impressive contested catches earlier in the year. Oklahoma was one of those. But there have been times where I feel like he's not fighting back to the ball as well as he could. And I agree. I mean, Andrew Marsh's emergence gives Michigan a true number one receiver and then allows, the deep tight end core and then McCulley himself and everyone else to have a little bit more breathing room, if you will, to make plays on the periphery.
Yeah, McCulley's more of a complimentary guy, I think, and then he can excel at that. I also 65% chance he throws a pass this weekend. Everybody watch out for that one.
Former quarterback. In fact, his first experience at Michigan Stadium was quarterbacking Indiana in 2021, which he was, I think, the third string quarterback at that point, and that was McCulley against David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson, and that did not go well. I asked him this year, I was like, hey, what do you remember about that game? And he said, I just remember Aiden Hutchinson getting after me. And there's that. And he also, when he came back, it must have been in 23, he was playing receiver for Indiana at that point, but he did have a trick play touchdown for Indiana. So yeah, it's something I think Michigan's tried it, but McCulley and then Kendrick Bell, who's a receiver as well, both former quarterbacks who, Sherrod Moore's been known to break out a trick play or two against the Buckeyes. That's certainly something you could see happening.
And Ohio State's been very disciplined with those plays this year. Also, I thought Michigan did a good job against Maryland, being disciplined defensively and also on special teams with the onside kick that came at them. So it seems like everybody's ready and just mentally and sharp based on their play this year, ready for this game.
Yeah, to Tony's point, Michigan has been unimpressive on the scoreboard against will be kind mid-level to lower-level Big Ten teams, Purdue, Wisconsin, et cetera, down the line. And then last week, is it fair to say that they put together their most complete game pretty much of the season, excluding Washington, of course. That's the outlier in regards to good opponent, convincing win.
Yeah, I mean, I think Maryland's defense is exactly what Michigan would want to face. Maryland, two freshman defensive ends who are talented, but still freshmen, defensive tackles who aren't really anything to write home about at this point. Like it's a defense that basically every Big Ten team for the last 7 games has been able to run all over, and Michigan was able to do so with its third string running back, breaking 100 yards without too much of an effort there. So, listen, when Michigan can get its offense moving the ball consistently on the ground, it's going to look good. And they're going to lean on that and then find plays in the passing game. So I think Maryland, being what it is, made it easy for Michigan to put up a lot of points and to have a day that looked very successful on the ground and just offensively as a whole. So certainly if you're Michigan, exactly what you want before Ohio State, have a game where you feel like everything's clicking. But also I do think the competition caveat has to be pretty strongly mentioned that Maryland is among the worst Power 4 teams in rush defense, and Michigan obviously is Michigan when it comes to running the ball, and that game was almost always going to end that way based on that.
How about their defense? A lot of talk about how that unit has kind of grown over the course of the season, and that they've got some really good budding stars, I guess, on that side. And Ryan Day said that all 3 levels complement one another very well. Just what's a thought about the Michigan defense, maybe their growth over the 11 game schedule?
I think it's a bit similar to last year, at least in terms of the growth that you've seen throughout the year. I think, listen, last year Wink Martindale was a first-year college coordinator, first year at Michigan. I think you saw him kind of throughout the year understand the differences between, coordinating and coaching a college unit against college offenses, college hash marks, all of that compared to the NFL. And I think Michigan fans hoped like he would take those lessons, apply them to this year, and that Michigan would be able to kind of hit the ground running from week one. Kind of felt like he had to relearn that for a second straight year. What I'll say about this defense, it is talented. It does not have the same top level talent as Michigan had last year. I mean, as Ohio State learned, down in Columbus, like Michigan had two of the best, if not the two best defensive tackles in college football. And when you can start a defense with that, you can make the rest of it look pretty good, no matter kind of who's back there. Michigan has solid defensive tackles, not elite. Michigan has, I'd say a solid to good secondary, but I wouldn't say that there's the elite top end talent at the key positions, except for I'd say maybe at edge rusher, where Derek Moore is very, very good, where Jayshon Barham has kind of moved down from linebacker to defensive end. He has NFL talent. He has probably first round talent, but he's still very raw at the position. So again, it's a unit that is very good. I think it's top 10 in S&P Plus for a reason. But again, competition caveats always apply. Michigan hasn't necessarily played the elite offenses in college football. They made John Mateer look very, very good, and Oklahoma's offense look good. We have seen Oklahoma's offense not be very good for most of the rest of the year. We've seen USC's offense, USC always very good. Mekhi Lemon, an excellent receiver. What they did to Michigan, I think is fair to say that was embarrassing for Michigan's defense, particularly in the second half there. So there's still open questions. And I'd say that Ohio State obviously is going to test Michigan in ways that most other offenses cannot. And very, very much an open question as to what Wink Martindale will bring to the table. And then just from a skill level, can Michigan match up with the Jeremiah Smith, with the Julian Sains, with the high level skill talent that Ohio State has across the board?
It's obviously not going to be easy to run. USC was able to do it with a couple of big hits, and that was just kind of a bizarre situation that they ran so well. Oklahoma being able to run a little bit, 138 yards, I think 78 of that was Mateer, so you're not going to get that from Julian Sain in this game. I think what you might see is what you saw with the first play of the game against Maryland, where they run right at Jayshon Barham, because that's generally the best way to take him out, is just overwhelm him and not let him track down the ball from the backside or rush the passer or anything like that. My thing that I keep going back to is that as long as Ohio State can protect Julian Sain, I think the secondary can be gotten. And I think it's a group of two corners, Jair Hill and Zeke Berry, and then a bunch of strong safeties. And I don't think without Rod Moore, there's no necessarily guy that makes a play on the ball. Brandon Hillman will make a play on a person and knock them into the medical tent, but he's not necessarily a center fielder that will concern you. And Mason Curtis is big, but I think anytime you're a 6'5" safety, you're not necessarily the guy that can cover ground the way a center fielder would need. So you saw Jair Hill every week. He's getting beaten deep. Got beat deep at least 3 times against Maryland. Only one connected. I think if you protect Julian Sain, you've got the most accurate passer in the nation. And provided he's throwing to Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, I expect Ohio State to be able to throw the ball downfield. Now, is Michigan going to do everything they can to keep that from happening with safeties over the top? Probably. And then I guess it's just a matter of, you tell me this, like, there has been corners getting beaten deep. Like, do you expect a different kind of approach against Ohio State's offense, their passing game? Are you going to keep safeties back? You being Wink Martindale, are you going to keep the safeties back so that you can eliminate those big plays And will that then impact the run defense? Ohio State's very patient throwing the ball. They'll dink and dunk all day long. So how aggressive do you expect this Michigan defense to be, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a couple things. You mentioned Jason Barham earlier and running right at him. He's had trouble setting an edge. That's one of the, maybe the cost of moving him from linebacker to edge is that's something he's not quite good at. He is a very good pass rusher. He just has that talent. So is Derek Moore. Michigan, for whatever reason, maybe not for whatever reason, they found a lot of success in 2023 using heavy rotations along the defensive side of the ball. That they say was part of this, the secret to keeping guys fresh and going through Ohio State, Alabama, and Washington to win a national championship. I don't know if they can do that and be successful against Ohio State. So what I mean by that is this kind of circuitous way to answer your question of, I think Michigan will kind of keep a shell, try to prevent the big plays. But if they're playing, they have to play Derek Moore more than the 50% snap share than he's gotten throughout most of this year, because he is one of your best 2 or 3 defensive players, and you need to be able to get after Julian Sayin. And quite honestly, if it's not Derek Moore and Jason Barham at the edge, Michigan's not getting interior pass rush for the most part from its defensive tackles. So the formula for Michigan winning the game is in part Michigan needs to lean on its starters for all 70 or whatever defensive snaps are going to be played, because you're correct. Jair Hill has NFL aspirations. I think he has NFL potential. And I think for a good chunk of this year, you saw offenses respect that potential by not throwing at him. And so as a result, he looked really good as a corner because he just wasn't being targeted. And that, when you're evaluating corners, is often a really good sign. Maryland decided, hey, we're going to throw at Jair Hill. And were they successful? No, but that was more because Maryland couldn't connect on open deep shots than it was on Jair Hill, right? There were 2 or 3 times, as you mentioned, that you would only very nicely say that he was in trail coverage because he was 3 or 4 yards behind a receiver, running downfield. And it just so happened that, Malik Washington was not as accurate as he'd want to be, or the receiver, Maryland, I think, has had more drops than anyone in the Big Ten, and they would drop the pass, right? So I agree. Julian Sayin, he's got a strong arm. He's one of the, if not the most accurate quarterbacks in college football. Obviously, the receiving talent that Ohio State brings to the table every year is, off the charts. And this year's, if, both guys are healthy, that's another year of really elite receiving talent. The formula for Michigan, make them dink and dunk, make Ohio State dink and dunk down the field, but also you have to get a young quarterback in Sayin. You have to make them uncomfortable, and you do that by blitzing a bit potentially, but mainly by keeping your starters and your playmakers on the field as much as possible, which is something Michigan really hasn't done as much this year as I think they should have.
We have a super chat coming in here. We can respond to this one. We appreciate the contribution. Don B103. Wink. Artendale isn't better than Matty P. Julian Sayin has to practice against the best defensive coordinator in college football. I don't think the team up north is ready for what is about to happen.
That's Addy P. Sorry. You've got one there.
That's all right. You got to X out
on that one. Yes. I'm going to have to go around the house later today and work on that too. Yes.
I think those teams, when you look at it, haven't played anybody. I mean, when you really get right down to it, they both played Washington, and that might be, and of course, Ohio State played Texas and beat them. Michigan played Oklahoma and lost to them, but you get much beyond that. You kind of have to, they're not, neither of these, and really Ohio State's last 5 opponents all have losing records. So it's kind of like you got to turn it back on here in week, 12 to play a competitive game. And, which team's going to be able to do that? Obviously Michigan was tested 2 weeks ago by Northwestern, but again, that's not a top 10 team either. So to to me, I think that's a factor in this game, is which team is ready to up its game to meet the challenge here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Don, with that super chat, makes a good point. I mean, I think both teams would say that their offense practices against an NFL defense every week in practice. And whether, I mean, Michigan fans have thoughts on Wink Martindale, some of them, but the truth is, last year they closed the year by shutting down, a bad Northwestern offense, but then, shutting down the second half of a good Indiana offense, and then shutting down Ohio State and Alabama. And then this year, again, a top 10 defense to SP+. It's a good defense. Is it a great defense? We'll maybe find out on Saturday, and then in whatever happens in the postseason for Michigan. But the reality is, like, Michigan's defense is good. I don't want to sit here and denigrate it too much. It is very possible that Ohio State's able to move the ball on them, because Ohio State has a very good offense and elite skill position talent, and players make plays in games. But listen, Michigan, as Ohio State has been, like, they've been watching each other all year long. Michigan staff has been watching Ohio State's offense all year long. They know the tendencies. Ohio State's going to come out with tendency breakers. Michigan's going to come out with tendency breakers. Like, that's what you do in these games. But I'd say both defensive coordinators are going to bring out some interesting things to try to confuse young quarterbacks on the opposite side, and vice versa. And that's what makes this game so much fun, in part, is that that both coordinators and all four coordinators, when you're talking about the offensive coordinators, they've been preparing for this game for 12 plus weeks, and they're saving their best stuff, and they'll bring out their best stuff and things that have been planned specifically for this game. And it's going to be fun to watch.
Defensive coordinator, as Michigan fans got to see when Jim Harbaugh would just keep bringing in guys from the Ravens to run the defense, and the effect and the impact that it can have on opposing offenses who don't see stuff like that every day.
Let's hit the super chat, and then I would like to bring up injuries and how they may impact play calling and approach. But we got Ryan Dawes, our buddy Ryan. Appreciate you being here, Ryan. Thank you so much for the contribution. Sir, how many pick sixes, and who does it for Ohio State? Well, of course, Michigan kind of really brought the tension to the game in Columbus in the stadium with a near pick six last year that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. So, yes, and then obviously 2023, we had a near Michigan pick six on the play. Was that Will Johnson? That
was Will Johnson, yep.
Yeah, that on Marvin Harrison when he broke inside and took it to about the 5-yard line. So, yeah, obviously that could be decisive.
Yeah, I'll say Michigan's almost thrown two in the last 2 weeks. There was one that Northwestern brought down into the deep red zone, and then one that was not an interception, but I think was not an interception against Maryland because that defensive back had eyes for the end zone as he was breaking for that ball. And so there's certainly a possibility. Bryce Underwood, for the most part, has been pretty good at not putting the ball into harm's way, but as we just talked about, it's an elite Ohio State defense with elite secondary talent, very good pass rushing to elite pass rush. Like, there's just elite across the board there on that defense, and a lot of experience. And as was just mentioned, a former NFL coach and coordinator who's spent a lot of time figuring out how to confuse the picture for someone who's making his 12th collegiate start.
What is the last pick six in this game? Is it Malik Hooker against Wilton Spate in 2016?
I think it's got to be. Yeah.
I can't remember.
Against everybody, but
Ohio State only has 6 interceptions in 11 games this season. 2 by Caleb Downs, 2 by Jermaine Matthews, 1 by Peyton Pierce, a backup linebacker, and 1 by Sonny Styles. And so they haven't been a team that's picked off a lot of passes, obviously less than 1 a game. So would one, and of course they had 2 last year. Didn't Downs and Sawyer both have interceptions in that game? And the one from Sawyer denied Michigan a touchdown, and it's like, if they go on and win the game, obviously the Texas play superseded that later on, but you go on and win the game, and he's, regarded in Michigan game lore, if they're able to win that game. But he found himself regarded in Michigan game lore for something else later on, pushing the issue on the flag planting. But, I don't know if I just see Ohio State, I guess they got to get pressure on Underwood to create that situation. And against mobile or quasi-mobile quarterbacks, what they have done is just basically sent the ends about halfway up the field and just stand there and keep them in the pocket and really not collapse the pocket. They haven't done a lot of that against mobile quarterbacks. They've been content to let the quarterback stand in the pocket and make him make a throw against their secondary, which is a hard secondary to complete passes against typically. So I guess we'll see how that all turns out.
Yeah, cage the pocket, and then you probably have Arvell Reese there spying a little bit as well.
Yeah, he's done a great job on the delayed blitz. Like, okay, now they've committed. He is not gonna, can't escape the pocket. I'm gonna go get him in the pocket, and he's been fabulous at that.
Yeah, so from an injury standpoint, we can look at it this way. Michigan's obviously run first, and Justice Haynes was tearing it up, and he's been lost for the season. Jordan Marshall missed the previous game after he had really exploded the previous 2 or 3 games. And then on the Ohio State side, I'm not going to say this offense has been pass first, but as Julian Sain has become more and more comfortable, and Ryan Day has given him more of the keys to the offense throughout the season, Ohio State has looked more like what we expect an Ohio State offense to look like. Wisconsin, Minnesota, on through the mid part of the season to the later part of the season. Penn State taking deep shots on a regular basis. And then no Carnell Tate, no Jeremiah Smith against Rutgers. And suddenly, there's no downfield passing game, just nothing. And it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Smith is going to play. We believe Tate is going to play, but at what percentage are they going to be available in regards to their full health, and how is that going to impact the Ohio State offense?
How is the weather also going to, the cold rather, impact the tightness of the joints and the injuries as you're getting guys loosened up, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate getting them loosened up, and then as they tighten up over halftime or whatever, just like dealing with that, I think is interesting. I'm assuming Jordan Marshall is going to go as long as he doesn't get hit again and get some, freak landing, because he sure seemed like he was in good spirits yesterday.
Yeah, well, we had a chance to talk to him after practice yesterday. He'll be good to go. Sherrod Moore said he's full go. Jordan Marshall himself said he's full go. It was a shoulder injury he suffered in that Northwestern game. Seems like it was non-structural and more of a pain management type of thing. And he traveled to Maryland, dressed for Maryland, apparently could have gone against Maryland. They just opted to keep him kind of in the bag to make sure he was as healthy as possible for this Ohio State game. So I mean, obviously it's one thing to say you're good to go with a shoulder thing, and then another to take the hit when it's cold and, you haven't played maybe contact football in a little bit in a couple of weeks. So we'll see how that goes. But full expectation is he's starting and is as close to 100% as you could possibly be a couple of weeks out from a shoulder injury. A couple other notable things on the Michigan front injury-wise. Talented fullback tight end Max Bredesen, who's a captain. He suffered what looked to be a foot injury against Maryland. He is still in a walking boot. We actually talked to him after practice yesterday as well. He didn't practice. He said he's going to move heaven and earth to be on the field against Ohio State, but I don't know how much that'll be he'll be able to make an impact versus he's going to be like Blake Corum back in 2022, where he takes a couple snaps and realizes that, he can't play at the level that he needs to play at to be in this game. Obviously, Max Bredesen, he's not going to pop on the stat sheet if any Ohio State fans are looking, but, a couple of years in a row against Caleb Downs and against Alabama defenses a couple of years ago, Ohio State's defense last year. He's a real tone setter. He's a true fullback, and it would be both from an X's and O's standpoint, but also just from an emotional and, program identity standpoint, a bummer for Michigan and a detriment to Michigan if he can't go and if he's not close to 100%. And then the other on the defensive side of the ball, player worth mentioning is Ernest Hausman, who's both a captain, starting linebacker. He's worn the green dot for Michigan for most of the season. He missed the Maryland game for undisclosed reasons. I would say that probably leans more personal reasons versus injury reasons. And without getting too far into that, I would just say that it very much remains an open question about kind of what his involvement is and whether or not he will play against Ohio State. So certainly against a talented, diverse, multiple offense as Ohio State's, you would want your captain, starting linebacker, very experienced player in Ernest Hausman, who's been the green dot and the guy who kind of coordinates the defense. You'd want him playing, but that remains to be seen.
Without him, is it Jimmy Rolder or Cole Sullivan then who has the green dot?
I believe it was Jimmy Rolder against Maryland. He's also he's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. He's very much I'd say a typical Big Ten linebacker in that he's maybe not as agile, athletic, but he's a thumper. And if you kind of like a heat-seeking missile, if he knows where to go, he's gonna get there and make a play. He's a player that Michigan has thought highly of for a long time. He's just struggled with injuries throughout most of his career. He's, fortunately for him, for Michigan, he's been healthier this year, and as a result has had a very good season. Cole Sullivan, he's a true sophomore. He's a second-year player. I'm fairly certain he did not redshirt last year. He's a true sophomore, a very, very talented player, but he's missed some time recently with arm injury, I'd say. Came back last week against Maryland, looked like he was knocking some rust off. He's going to be a very good player, but he's being thrust into maybe a bigger role than expected, both given Ernest Hausman's absence and given that they moved Jayshawn Barham from the true inside linebacker role to edge.
And then early in their season, Sullivan, he just found the ball and the ball would find him. And it was interesting to see him playing earlier in the season and doing so well. I think you're right. The future is very bright for him. And one other thing I'd tell Ohio State fans is watch out for Brandon Hillman, number 6. Yep. He is the most violent player in college football. And the hitting in against the Northwestern game between Brandon Hillman and then Fitzgerald was insane. And there's this new sport in Australia where you just have two dudes run at each other full speed, no pads. Give me those two running at each other full speed, and then let's watch the crater that they leave.
It's a Oklahoma drill, I guess, Australia version. Yeah, Brandon Hillman, he's quietly had a nice year. I think he had a game that he did not play earlier this season, ostensibly for injury purposes, but it was after that USC game where he'd made a couple plays that were undisciplined. And I'd say for the most part, what's remarkable about him is I don't know if he's actually taken a targeting penalty at any point in his career, despite the violence with which he plays. He hits players hard, and he absolutely will, try to send a player to the medical tent or to the next stratosphere, however you want to say it. But so far, I mean, he's had a couple plays reviewed, but I, off the top of my head, can't think of one that's actually been upheld as targeting or as, unsportsmanlike. He's a clean player, but a very, very violent one. So, yeah.
I mean, there are times that he hits somebody with his entire body. So it's not like you can't target with, right. Your chest and your midsection and your hips. I mean, he throws himself at dudes, and the coverage and the tackling isn't always there, but if he connects, you're going to go down.
Yeah.
Alejandro, Tony brought up the weather, and we all know us humans cannot control the weather, but why is it that every other year when Ohio State goes to Ann Arbor, it seems like it's like 52 degrees in the middle of the week, and then it's forecasted to be like 25 on Saturday? It just seems to never fail.
Listen, University of Michigan is one of those elite research institutions that has a lot of scientists doing a lot of very important work. So I don't know if I don't know what's going on behind those closed doors, but it does look like there will be snow at some point. There will be cold at some point. Well, there will be cold all day, but snow at some point on Saturday. And I know Michigan fans are excited about that because of what happened in 2021 and because, the weather can be a little bit of a level the playing field, number one, but also lean into what Michigan does best, which is, pound the rock with a very physical running back in Jordan Marshall and a strong offensive line. Listen, I'll say this too, is this game is played later than it used to be, right? Every year, I feel like I get that notification of, it's been X number of years since Bo Schembechler passed away. And that was the week before, right? It didn't always used to be on Thanksgiving week where the game was played. It used to be a week earlier. So I don't know. At the same time, listen, that 2023 game, that was beautiful weather up here in Ann Arbor. The game in 2022 down in Columbus, that was like 60 degrees. It was unseasonably warm. Obviously last year that was cold and windy down in Columbus, but that's what you get in November football, for better or for worse. Michigan really leans into it. And I this is very much feelings versus X's and O's, but it does feel like cold weather, snowy weather leans into whatever mental edge Michigan fans seem to think Michigan could have in this game based on the 4 straight wins. Obviously, we'll see. It would very much be, I think, an exercising of demons for Ohio State if they can come into Ann Arbor, beat Michigan, and beat Michigan when the weather isn't perfect. I think there's little Ohio State would want more than that.
I've told these two guys the story of my daughter, who is anything but a football expert by any stretch of the imagination. But about midnight of the eve of the 2021 game, she shows me a screenshot of the forecast in Ann Arbor and just puts, uh-oh. And, going into that, we were all kind of like, well, this is the Michigan game, so it's sacred and it's important and we take it seriously. But there was a little bit of arrogance setting in at that point, like, oh, they're 10-1, but this is still going to be a win. And then that even kind of, my heart kind of sunk when I looked at that. But ironically, Stroud and the receivers seemed to be fine. They threw for 400 yards. And if not for them, that might have been just really ugly.
Yeah, it wasn't the offense that lost them the game in 2021. It was a defense that had about 2 NFL players on it that lost them that game. And I know everybody likes to talk about the blowout, but it was a 1-score game with 3 minutes to go. And so, yeah, it was the same with the 2022 game, which was a 1-score game with about 7 minutes to go. So these games have been close despite some of the final scores. And then, of course, they've been close with the final scores the last 2 years. And, Michigan certainly has the advantage being at home. I think Ohio State has the talent advantage, but we saw the talent advantage last year. Like I've been saying this all week, no matter however much analysis we all want to give about this game, last year showed that. So great analysis. So look at the score, look what happened. So, and I think we'll talk about this one until the game gets here. And then there's always the chance of, so.
Yeah. Yep. I saw a comment there about the 2007 game, remembering the weather for that one. And if anyone remembered it, I was at that 2007 game. I was in the stands. I remember the person I was with signing up for a credit card at the stadium simply because if you signed up for a credit card, they would give you a blanket for free. So we got a blanket to stay warm during that game. And presumably that credit card was canceled at some point. But yeah, you get cold weather, you get different weather, you get early sunsets, dark maybe by the end of the game. I remember trying to drive home after the 2021 game, and it took a very long time to get out of Ann Arbor that night as the snow had really piled on. It was that's what you get with November football, and that's it's that gunmetal gray sky when you get November football, and that's that's part of the lore of the rivalry, right? You get the blizzard game in the 50s, like, where you punted on first downs and, no first downs for Michigan, but they won with, a couple blocked punts. Like, it's just, those are the stories you tell your kids about. And I think, for Michigan fans who are at the 21 game, 20, 30 years down the road, they're going to be talking about there was 2 feet of snow on the ground and nobody could see anything. And, we didn't know Hassan Haskins had scored 5 touchdowns because we could only hear from the roar of the crowd, all those type of things. Like, that's
you
what
had to dig the car out to get out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably still my favorite memory of the game is Art Schleicher scoring at Ann Arbor in 1981. He got pushed out of bounds. There was about 2 minutes left in the game. Ohio State was a 10-point underdog, and he basically, slid into a snow stack because they had cleared the field. And it was like brutal weather, very cold, and Ohio State pulled off an upset that year. Alejandro, we so much appreciate you being here. And before you check out, we will definitely let people know where to find you and your work. But wanted to ask you about this because you have referenced Michigan's week schedule this year in the Big Ten. Obviously, they had a difficult one last year. It appears as though they'll get hit pretty hard next year. And that's kind of the nature of an 18-team league. The disparity in these schedules is kind of crazy. So do you think an Ohio State victory, meaning a Michigan win over Ohio State, will be enough to propel them? Obviously, we can throw up all sorts of scenarios across the country, but if chalk ensues generally across the country, whether that will be enough to elevate Michigan
to the college football playoff, is that the question? I think so. Just based on last night's rankings, Michigan moved up to 15 on the backs of what the committee said was an impressive win over Maryland. I think that's maybe a little bit of them covering their own behinds and trying to give a brand that they know is a very good brand and a team that they know is going to drive a lot of eyeballs and a lot of money, a more feasible path to the playoff if they beat Ohio State. I mean, listen, I don't know. I think it would be difficult for them to keep a 10-2 Michigan team out of the playoff, given that Michigan would have won, so many games in a row, including beating, the number 1 team in the country the week before the final rankings come out. I think if Michigan fans had their way, if Michigan probably as a program had its way, they would beat Ohio State and not make the Big Ten championship game. Take that week off, get healthier, and kind of wait for chaos to unfold, and then sit there nice with 10 wins and your most recent performance being a win over Ohio State. And I think Michigan would feel comfortable that they would make the playoff. It is unfortunate that the schedule kind of breaks the way it does, because we've gotten to this point in the year. And I mean, Ohio State has that win over Texas, but for Michigan, it feels like there just hasn't been a single marquee win this year. There hasn't been a real exciting victory. Listen, they beat Washington, but they beat Washington at home, and Washington's kind of been awful on the road all year, so that doesn't really say a whole lot. They've lost the games that people, for the most part, thought they were going to lose when the season started, at Oklahoma, at USC. And so we've gotten to this point in the year where they've kind of played to expectations, and it's kind of unfortunate that the year's kind of been a dud, at least schedule-wise and results-wise. I do think, though, that certainly beating Ohio State, that's a feather on the cap of any season, particularly this season where there hasn't been that other marquee win. And it would be hard to argue to keep Michigan out if their last game is a win over number 1.
If that happens, if they do beat Ohio State, you're going to have somebody, either Notre Dame, Alabama, or Michigan, that gets left out at 10-2, and
just un-American.
They're going to be furious because Oklahoma's they're sitting at 8, and that's kind of, Michigan can't go beyond that because they lost to Oklahoma. Somebody's going to be upset about being 10-2, and
Greg Sankey's going to come in. Greg Sankey's going to come in and expand the playoff to 13 teams for this year only. Like, it's going to happen.
Give the Bulldogs a double bye.
Steve, Tony, anything else for Alejandro?
I think we covered it. Tony?
Yep. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for stopping by and checking us. on all of this stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and
we'll see you up there, Alejandro.
Yeah, I'll see you guys on Saturday.
We appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. All right, good stuff there for sure. Well, here we are again, Ohio State and Michigan. It seems unfathomable to lose 5 consecutive games, especially this is not Earl Bruce handing off the 1987 team to John Cooper and losing, in the early 90s. That's the last time we had a group of Buckeyes that had not experienced a Michigan win, was that early 90s bunch, but they were losing 3 and 4 games a year. It's just, this, I believe, is the best team in the country. But before we wrap this up, Tony, Steve, right side of the Buckeyes offensive line has not been the best, and there's been a certain favor to the left side, and Josh Padilla's health is in question. Maybe he gets back in the lineup, filling in somewhere.
I don't think they're going to put him back in the lineup this week. I think it's going to be Gabe Van Sickle rotating in as that second right guard with Tager Shabola. And I think in terms of the right side, Phillip Daniels also needs to keep his cool. Don't cost any 15-yard penalties or 10-yard penalties. And just play with emotion. Don't let emotion play with you, as Ryan Day likes to say. But yeah, I expect some left-handed offense for at least in the running game.
Yeah, I would think if they do take Shabola out, I thought he played a little bit better this past week, that would be Gabe Van Sickle. I will say that Sayin was hit 4 times, even though he was not sacked. So there was a little bit of leakage here and there, and he was pressured maybe into some throws. And one more kind of a sobering thought. I mean, you play without Smith and Tate, and they completed 14 passes total, and only 4 of them to wide receivers, 2 to David Adolph, who hadn't really played all season long, and now he's out there on every play. And then 2 to Brandon Ennis, including 1 for a touchdown, just an amazing throw over the defense in the back of the end zone. I don't know how you make that throw kind of a looping throw. I don't know how you other describe it, with some zip on it. I mean, it's the doggonest thing you've ever seen, but I put it right over the defender, right where Ennis could get it in his breadbasket and get a foot down in bounds, going out of bounds. Just an incredible throw. But if Max Clare, has 7 catches, and Tony, in one of the shows that we did earlier in the week, Tony brought up how Michigan has struggled covering tight ends this year. Maybe Max Clare is an X factor in this game that he can get loose and catch some passes. But you got to hope that Smith and or Tate are both close to 90%, because even at 90%, they're going to do pretty well against Michigan.
All right, Steve, you've seen a few of these. So what's going on at Bucknuts this week?
Oh, my goodness. We are drinking water out of a fire hose this week with everything that's going on. But it is Wednesday at 12 o'clock. In 3 days, we'll be sitting there at the big house waiting on the start of the game, and can't wait to get up there and experience it. I think it's going to be the 36th or 37th time I've seen an Ohio State-Michigan game, and looking forward to it. I mean, this is what it's all about. We'll have all of our usual features up on Bucknuts, including game data and picks on all the games coming up here in the next day or two.
Tony.
Mark, I'm feeling like you. We've put up 13 episodes of Buckeye Weekly this week, and have 5 or 6 more scheduled, and then a full Friday of action. So that's where most of my time has been spent. So you can find the Buckeye Weekly podcast on all of your podcast platforms, and of course at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, where hopefully I'll get to write something about the whole thing, the whole shebang, the game this week. I'll probably be doing that on Thanksgiving, as that's about the only time I won't be recording. I can actually write something and won't be driving to Ann Arbor.
All right, everyone. Lock it in with Tony and with Steve this week. You can catch me tonight, Miami at 7, Florida State at 8, and then the call-in shows at 10 p.m. Eastern time. But again, for your Ohio State, Michigan coverage, Tony, Buckeye Weekly, podcast and Buckeye Huddle, and of course, Steve at Bucknuts. Guys, it's always a great show every time we do this, every week, but especially this particular week. And safe travels. Enjoy the game. Bring back a W.
Have a great and happy Thanksgiving, everybody out there. Safe as well. And look forward to seeing you on the other side next week, talking about what could be a huge Ohio State win for Ryan Day. Got to get that monkey off of his back. And hopefully talking about Ohio State #1 versus Indiana #2 in the Big Ten championship game.
Well, I also think it's fair to point